Hello, and thank you for joining us on an episode of The Designated Pundits. It's the 2026 Major League Soccer preview series, and today we're talking about the Colorado Rapids. I'm Bob here today with Scott, and we're here with Connor Cape, the voice of the Colorado Rapids, to preview the 2026 Major League Soccer season. We're going to start with a brief recap of 2025. Then we're going to talk about transfers, depth chart, finish up with some questions and tactics. So if you're watching live, drop those comments. Make sure you hit that bell icon to be notified every time we go live. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can find us on all your favorite podcast platforms, including Spotify now with video. Connor, how you doing today?
Guys, I'm doing awesome because we are a couple weeks away from the season kicking off, and I feel like there's been so much downtime. Like the holidays have dragged on, winter has dragged on. I'm ready to start kicking the ball again and get out there.
I totally feel that. And of course, you are also in the West, so it feels like spring right now.
Yeah, it's 65 degrees today, which is, I mean, it's great, but it's probably not good. So we're ready for actual spring.
Yeah, it just speeds all that up. Right now, it should be 20 degrees. There should be 3 feet of snow on the ground, and we should be like, no, soccer season is so far in the future, but it feels like spring. And all of us now in the East, you don't understand this, but
we definitely get this right now, because when I was a kid, it used to snow 8 or 10 times a season for like 2 or 3 inches, maybe 1 or 2 big snowstorms. We haven't had any of that. It snowed 3 times in the last 5 years. I'm 10 minutes outside New York City. Now, we've had 18 inches just last week. We've had 5 snowstorms already, so we are getting it here. And it is, I would say, about the 16th day of 35 or under. Normally, we do get little cold snaps, but not 20 degrees, 15 degrees for 10 days in a row. Ridiculous, man.
It is springtime for us right now.
Like, I would move.
I've got birds out and like chirping away, out eating at the bird feeder, like in a way that is hard to explain. It is springtime on February 6th.
Meanwhile, I feel like James Rodriguez moving from Minnesota. That's where I'm at right now. All right, but we're here to talk about the Colorado Rapids 2025. Just a brief recap. 11 wins, 8 draws, and 15 losses was good enough for 11th place in the West. They were knocked out of the CONCACAF Champions Cup in the first round, and they went 1-1-1 in Leagues Cup, eliminated by penalties in that draw game. How they got there? Well, 44 goals scored was 10th in the West, and 56 goals against was 11th in the West. Minus 12 goal differential, that was also good for 11th in the West. Not a fantastic season. We're going to talk about some upsides, some highlights in kind of the next slide, but just talk about 2025 and how you guys felt.
Man, 2025. It was a year that was supposed to be more, because you're thinking about the second year under Chris Armas. The first year went well. I don't think anybody would say that the first year was a bad year. So you're expecting to build on that in the second year, and it felt like there was just none of that building, none of that progression, where it's like, okay, we're clearly improving, we're taking the next step, we're fighting for top 4 and home field advantage in the West, and it didn't materialize that way, which is too bad, because I am the biggest Chris Armas fan that you could possibly find. Chris Armas, I think the human being, the soccer coach, all of it is just fantastic. I'm really excited for what he's going to do in Kansas City with the Current in the NWSL, and I wish it had worked out better with the Rapids, because he is great, and you can tell that he knows the game, and you could tell that it was a good culture in the locker room. It was a big piece that was important to the club to get right, was a culture guy, somebody who was going to unify the locker room, and that happened. It was just, you look at the stats, on the screen, 44 goals scored, 10th in the West. That's never going to be good enough. But I think it's the 56 goals against, 11th in the West, that really hurts you. And part of that is like style of play. Chris was never going to compromise on his style of play. He was never going to say, all right, man, we're just getting absolutely thumped right now. We need to bunker in, change the way we're playing. Maybe instead of losing 5-0, we'll lose 2-0. Never compromised in that respect, which it kind of led to some lopsided score lines, especially his first year. I think it was his first game actually was at Portland, and it was either 3-0 loss or 4-0 loss. And there were a few lopsided score lines like that because he wasn't going to change the way he was going to play. And maybe a little bit more pragmatism in that sense would have served the club a little bit better in 2025. But I absolutely respect somebody who says this is my tactical identity and this is the way we're going to play. And there were enough bright spots that I think you could point to it being obviously not a successful year when you don't make the playoffs or when you're not competing for trophies. But you look at Darren Yappy, he finally had his breakout season, ends up with 8 goals. And now big things are going to be expected of Darren Yappy in 2026 and Rafa Navajo, and he had 12 goals. And so you're producing, and your frontline guys are producing. It just felt like there was never any cohesion throughout. Like if the front line was playing well, the defenders weren't playing well. If the defenders were playing well, then the frontline guys weren't scoring goals. If the midfield was disconnected, everybody was discombobulated. It just felt like a year where we never got everything put together perfectly in time. And then obviously, down the stretch, it ended up not being so good. There was an opportunity to make the playoffs, and you go to LA and it's a Galaxy team that was struggling all year. You lose 3-0. You go to Kansas City, who was contending for the wooden spoon. You go to these places back to back, and I think we lost 4-2 in Kansas City. Like those were probably the 2 most pivotal matches of 2025, because this was a team that on paper should have been able to win those games against the teams below them. Because I feel like what we're always talking about with MLS teams is compete against the teams above you in the table and beat the teams below you in the table, and you'll be fine. Like you will be able to make the playoffs and the run. And it's the teams that don't take care of business against teams below them in the table that you pay the price for it. And that's ultimately what happened.
That's the interesting thing to me with this Colorado team, because at home, 8-4-5 record, totally fine. That is a good enough home record. That's like 5th in the West or something like that. So really nothing to worry about there. It's that 3-4-10 away record. You talk about like pragmatism and having just a little bit of flexibility to make changes. And like for me, I'm just like looking at that road record and thinking that's where it was supposed to be. Is that the feeling that you're just looking at, you're like, home, okay, yeah, okay, it could be better. But because like it's not just on paper you should win those games. Yeah. On the grass as well, you should win those games.
Well, part of it is the goal differential. I mean, you look at +4 goals at home, -16 away, and 35 goals allowed on the road in 17 matches. That's 2 goals a game plus, when it was only 21 goals allowed at home. So, it's the offense was nearly where you would expect. They were still scoring goals on the road. It was just conceding.
Yeah, and that's, I guess it may be like when you put it in that light, like maybe it really does just come back to pragmatism. Like maybe if you play a little bunker ball at San Diego or at LAFC, at Portland, and try to nick a point here and there, and maybe you squeak into the playoffs with that. But yeah, it's when you put it in that context, it's like, man, we were good enough at home. There was enough at home. It was exciting. It was fun. You were racking up points, but then every time you leave, was it 3 wins on the road? Like that's tough. And this league, it's already tough to win on the road. Even if you are pragmatic, even if you are conservative, it is still tough to steal points on the road. And what's so funny about that is we had that game in Seattle where we're down 3-0 and come back and tie 3-3. And you're thinking like, you do it against the Sounders in one of the toughest places to play, on turf, one of the toughest environments, difficult place to play. You can play against anybody. You can beat anybody, anywhere, anytime. And that's just, that's the nature of MLS, but you actually have to do it. And the 2025 Rapids just did not do it on the road.
So let's now transition and talk a little bit about some of the stories throughout the season. You sold Georgi Mihailovic to Toronto. What the heck is this team doing? How are they ever going to recover? Well, they brought in Paxton Aronson. I think that is a probably maybe even a plus substitution there that happened throughout the midseason. And again, the end of the season, mutually parted ways with Chris Armas. I can't wait to see what he does with the KC Current, because his time in Red Bull was maybe with a lesser squad than he would have needed. He wasn't set up for success. And I feel like each job he's had since then, he hasn't been set up for success. Red Bull fans are notoriously mean to coaches, and they would always say that he was nothing more than like a gym coach, like a phys ed coach at the high school level. But, I mean, you sit on the bench at Manchester United, you know, you could say a lot about the squad these years anyway, but you got to know a little bit about soccer. So I really want to see, I think he's going to be really, really great with the women's game, because I knowing him, speaking with him, I think that he's always found a way to approach soccer with, kindness and compassion while still not sacrificing values. So I think that he should be, in the way KC Current just beat everyone in NWSL until the playoffs last year. They had such a great season. I really, really hope he does well. I could see him being a really great coach in NWSL for a long time.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I'm excited to see. Like, I think everybody thinks like that current squad is pretty stacked, especially with two-time MVP in Timwa. Like, that's a proven goal scorer, and that makes life easier for everybody. But obviously, this isn't a KC Current podcast.
Probably the best striker he's had, comparatively.
I don't think he's had any two-time MVPs anywhere else.
No. Good shout. Look, I actually want to put a bookmark here for us for the future, because I think the decision to mutually part ways with Chris Armas, I think that was a bold move, and then the decision to bring in Matt Wells to replace him is another. I'm going to say brave move. I don't think it's ill-advised or anything like that, but I do think it's brave, and I'm very interested in what that looks like. But we will get there, because I do think that we should talk about some of the offensive contributors on the field last year. Wrap that up before we turn the page, especially as we talk about kind of those storylines that were. Rafael Navajo, 12 goals, 3 assists. Like, that's a pretty good return. Georgi Mihailovic, 9 goals, 6 assists in half a season, by the way. Yeah. That's a great return.
Good player.
What a player he really is. Darren Yappy, 8 goals, 2 assists, as you were mentioning, a breakout year for him. Calvin Harris, 5 goals and an assist. And then Cole Bassett, 3 goals, 3 assists. And I almost want to say that all of those were super impactful, by the way. Cole Bassett, I think is a tremendous player. I sometimes we talk about these contributors and we talk about big drop-offs. That doesn't necessarily stand out to me this time. I feel like the contributors are pretty good.
I think I mean, anytime there's an interleague move as big as Georgie going to Toronto and swapping conferences, like, I think that's the headline grabbing move, right? Is why'd you do that move midseason? Why'd that happen? He was so productive. But like you alluded to, like, you bring in Paxton Aronson, like, on the heels of that, it's basically the same thing you just did with Georgie just a couple years earlier in the cycle of his career, where Georgie goes to Europe, leaves MLS, goes to Europe, plays, comes back to MLS, a little bit more seasoned maybe. You're kind of hoping for that same thing with Paxton, except he's coming at a younger age, where maybe you can keep him around a little more long term. That's a strategic long-term investment, not something that the next summer you're looking to necessarily flip to Toronto or something like that. But yeah, I mean, Harris, like, that's 5 goals, 1 assist, that incredible pace, and had moments where he was incredible attacker, incredible winger. But you get Dante Sealy to come in and fill that gap, who was even more productive with Montreal, with a Montreal team that also struggled. What if you give Dante Sealy, Paxton Aronson, and Rafa Navajo and Darren Yappy, and a little bit more pressure or a little bit less pressure is on his shoulders to be the guy or the contributor? Maybe he gets a little more comfortable. Maybe he gets a little bit better because of that. So yeah, the 2025 team, like it's one of those things. Like if you don't make the playoffs and you have a lot of roster turnover, how upset can you really be about the turnover that you have because you didn't make the playoffs with those guys? Like, I mean, I'm gonna miss Cole Bassett, the human being, more than anything else. Fantastic, fantastic kid and a fantastic soccer player. Gonna miss that, but we didn't make the playoffs. Like, if you bring in a replacement who can do a little bit more, which that's always what every GM is trying to do, right? Maybe you make the playoffs in 2026.
And it is some roster turnover too. Like I think we can see that Colorado is making an effort to make things be different. Sam Bassett, Calvin Harris, Oliver Larraz, Andres Baxo, Cole Bassett, Adam Beaudry. Several of these guys are guys that played significant minutes for Colorado last season.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Larraz, who was a guy who was either Armis's first year, so it was 2 years ago, where he just had an outstanding preseason and basically forced his way into the lineup every game because he ran so hard. He defended so well. He was productive when he got into the final third. He basically just bullied his way into the lineup. He wasn't penciled in the offseason as like, we're going to rely on Ollie Larraz for a lot of minutes. He basically just forced it with his play. And I think losing that, like, that's a detriment. Just like losing Cole Bassett and Max Sue, like those are detriments, and I wish them nothing but the best. But when you look at what's coming in, Hamza, I mean, this is a guy who on film, like, looks like he could really be like the real deal. And Sydney, I mean, I don't know if you guys are super familiar with R2 down in Next Pro, but he's one of the best players in Next Pro. If he just continues to develop, if he just continues to get better, he's going to be a productive MLS player.
I think as we look at the players coming in, Noah Cobb fully acquired, Dante Sealy, Hamzat, as you just mentioned, Ojediran, Donovan Phillip, a draft pick, and then Sydney Wathuta as a Next Pro acquisition. Like I can see Colorado filling holes. Hamzat in the middle of the field, Dante Sealy as an attacker. I think the thing that I almost like have to ask is, this doesn't feel like they have necessarily equated what left fully, if that makes sense. Like I almost feel like they did a good job of picking out some pieces that they could say goodbye to. And I'm not sure that they've brought in everybody they need to bring in yet.
No, that's fair. That's fair. And I think it's one of those things where when you look at who the guys they brought in, you're betting on youthful guys. Like you're betting on Sydney being productive. You're betting on him continuing to make the next step in his career. And draft picks, like I feel like the draft is, you either have people who do not give one iota care about the draft at all, and then you have people who look at the draft and go, well, we could find the next Moise Bombito in the draft, and he ends up being, $6.5 million off to Europe. The Rapids feel like the draft there's still value there because there's still a Moise Bombito there. There's maybe, we'll see what Donovan Phillip can be, but there's still value in the draft. But you're betting on it. Like you said, there's proven production, there's proven MLS minutes walking out the door. You're not replacing it like for like with MLS minutes and MLS production, maybe outside of Sealy, who's done it at this level. Otherwise, you're betting on these younger guys to all take the next step.
Now that we've talked about some incoming and outgoing players, I want to take a look at a depth chart we have. This is assuming a 4-3-3. I don't know that that's necessarily fair to assume right now, but I kind of took what was played last year. Now, of course, with the midfielders you have in, maybe it's a more of a 4-1-2-1-2 kind of thing. If Sealy wants to step up next to Navajo, I don't know. I'm not saying I don't know. Is this a good representation of what you would expect to see this season?
It's a great question, Bob. It's a great question. I don't think anybody knows the answer unless they've been down in Florida with the team. Like, just full transparency. Like, when coaches come into MLS, like they keep everything under lock and key. And on February 22nd at Seattle, that is at kickoff. That's about when we'll really learn what the tactics, formations, what the assignments of guys are. Right now, we can go off of clips that the social media team is posting out there on Instagram and Twitter and stuff, but it's it's conjecture. Like maybe it's going to be a 4-3-3. Maybe it's going to be something entirely different. I think you can safely assume with the Sealy acquisition that wingers are going to be important. And then what is the formation that maybe gives Paxton the most either freedom to move or gives him the most responsibility to create goals? And you look at letting Cole Bassett go, letting LaRaz go in free agency, like those are proven midfielders in MLS, but you keep Atencio, you keep Ronan, you keep Frederick, you add Hamzat. Atencio has played D mid. Wayne Frederick has played a lot of D mid. Ronan has played a lot of defensive midfielder in a double pivot, along with kind of that 8 position, a lot of defensive midfielders. So if you kind of put together the clues through who's still here, maybe you can suss out what the strategy is going to be, what the tactics are going to be. I assume it's going to be 4 at the back, but it could be 5. I feel like the 3-5-2 is becoming more and more popular in this league, especially when you have quick wingbacks, which Vines is fast, Jackson Travis is fast, Cannon is super quick. Keegan's maybe the only one who, now that he's a little bit older, is not super speedy, but he spent his whole career being a fullback that bombed up and down the wing. So he knows how to do it. So maybe it's that. This is good. It's a great question. And I wish I had an answer for you, but all I can say is we got to tune in against Seattle.
I was looking into Matt Wells's history as a coach, right? Obviously long time spent with Tottenham, some years with Fulham and Bournemouth as well. And the thing that stuck out to me was that he was with Tottenham under like Poch, under Ainge, under Thomas Frank. And I was like, those versions of Tottenham were so completely different. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you're picking up some assistant coach from somewhere and you're like, yeah, well, he has this whole career built with this one style. Like, right. No, they're totally different. So it's almost like unfair even to ask, but like, what do we know about Matt Wells?
Right. And I think one of the things that sticks out about him is he is the things that have been talked about recently is defensive genius, like thinking like Eric Ramsey, when you think of like English guy who knows how to defend against really effective attackers, which maybe that's your base, your foundation for your team is defending. Set pieces, which Chris Sharp is the goalkeeper coach / first team assistant / set piece guru. You know, there was a time a couple years ago where the Rapids had scored the most goals on set pieces like 3 or 4 years in a row. That's all Chris Sharp, and he's stayed on the staff with Wells. So you think just basically, team is going to be good at defending. Team is going to be good at set pieces, both in attack and defense. And then the other thing that I know is really attractive about Wells is the way that he promotes youth, the way that he helps guys reach their potential. He's spent a lot of time in academies with kids getting to the professional level and making the most of the talent that they have. So I'd expect a big emphasis on that. It's just, what does that actually look like on the field? There is no tactics for, well, there's a youth movement. There is no preferred formation for that, right? Like it's hard to say, but those are the big things that stick out about his career and where he's excelled.
So why don't we focus on things we do know? Zach Steffen will be in goal.
I think that's a starter you can put in Sharpie.
We we're talking before the show, and when I was making a show doc, I said, "Oh, Zach Steffen, new to 2025," and it was no, he's been here for a couple of years already. He still feels fresh and new, but I think that could be a strength for the team. Moving up one level, you have some capable center backs. Rob Holding is someone I'm really excited to see. Noah Cobb, I think he was with Atlanta, if I don't. Young kid, if I remember correctly there. Ian Murphy, Lucas Harrington on this roster. If you had let's pretend we're doing two, who's your best two?
Today, it's Holding and Cobb. And I think Cobb is one of those guys who, a little bit younger, is going to get minutes early. Like, he's going to be a guy that is relied upon and should, if everything goes to plan, should grow throughout the season. Like, should just get better as the season goes on. It's just center back is one of those positions that it's so hard to put young players into, because so much of that position is not necessarily about your athleticism or about your speed, but it's about your game IQ. And coaches don't like to trust teenagers with that big position, but he's a guy who impresses on and off the field. Like, he has that high soccer IQ.
That's crazy. He turned 20 last July. And you're right. Center back is a position. We were just talking about this on another episode, but center back is a position that you absolutely do not peak until you're older, because so much of it is experience. That's insane. Assuming that Noah Cobb does have a good season, but is young, needs a break, who do you think is the first guy off the bench in that center back spot?
Murphy. He's earned it. Like, he was good in Cincinnati when they relied on him, and he's been good since he's been in Colorado. He's one of those guys who, like, just very fundamentally sound, like, is going to do the right thing, make the right pass, defend the right way. He's not going to blow you away with necessarily, like, with his athleticism. He's not going to be Sergio Ramos, but there's only one Sergio Ramos, right? He's a guy that, I mean, it also wouldn't shock me if he's starting in Seattle either, just because he's so fundamentally sound. He's so technically sound, and he can play center back and fullback.
Let's talk. I think we talked a little bit about the fullbacks: Sam Vines, Jackson Travis, Reggie Cannon, Keegan Rosenberry. It sounds like one of the primary strengths of that group is the ability to get up and down the field.
Yeah, and this is you look at last year, Rafael Santos is acquired from Orlando for half the season, and he's phenomenal at with the ball at his feet, defending a little shaky, which so many fullbacks, like, when they're attack minded, that's usually a byproduct of that, is the defending can be a little shaky. He goes to St. Louis in free agency, so now it's a position battle at both fullback positions, where Vines is your homegrown local kid who has been here, has gone to Europe and come back, all the hype, all the experience, but also still has a ton of athleticism and is really good going forward. But Travis is the kind of guy who's going to push him. Like, I remember last year, before Santos was acquired, like, the position battle between Vines and Travis was weekly, like, who was going to start, because they were both pushing each other so hard. And on the other side, Cannon, since he came in from Boa Vista, has kind of locked down that right back spot. But Rosenberry's nothing to be like, oh, that's necessarily written in Sharpie, just because Keegan is high IQ, fundamentally sound, technically sound. Sure, he's over 30, and that's about when soccer players start getting put out to pasture. Like, we understand all that. But if anybody could overcome that, it's Keegan. But it should be one of the strengths of the team, is the fullback position.
It's an interesting thing. There's a lot of, crossover with the defense last season, who did give up quite a few goals.
Right.
What makes them better? Is it a tactical shift with the new coaching staff? Is it maybe something about the midfield in front of them that has shifted? Like, why should that defensive unit do better than last year?
That's a really good question, because It's a good question with an answer that is kind of somewhat TBD, but we know that Arm, as we talked about it earlier, was not going to change his philosophy, was not going to change his identity. Didn't matter who was lined up across from his guys. He was going to be the same always. Every other coach in MLS that I've ever seen is a little bit more pragmatic or a little bit more conservative, or will go out of their way to put their guys in positions where they have backup. A lot of the Chris Armas defending was, we're going to press, and that works when everybody presses together. If one guy presses and another guy stays back, now you have two guys out on an island. That's two guys who have both just taken themselves out of the play. So if Wells is going to be a little bit different in that respect, or change the way that he presses, or what the press trigger is, like I'm sure you guys have played FIFA, like you can control the tactics, right? On like when your defense presses. If it's like when somebody gets the ball, it's when somebody's dribbling, or it's when somebody has a mistouch. Like there's different triggers for every defensive system. So I think if the triggers for the press are a little bit different, maybe guys are not on islands. Maybe guys are not defending 1v1 as often, because that's when you get beat. That's when your center backs get beat by pace, they get beat by athleticism, they get beat 2v1, and guys are out of position. So defensively, just by changing the nature of your defensive tactics, should get better, because you shouldn't have guys getting exposed in that way just because you're not playing that same kind of Armas high press system all the time.
I buy that. Let's look at that midfield then, who would be shielding them, and who would be that one of that next layers of press, I should say. Like there's a lot of center mids on this team. Hamzat, I think, obviously brought in to start, and Atencio was one of the guys you called out earlier. If you were to pick two center mids, is that it?
Man, I might bump Ronan up. Ronan started last year with an appendectomy that kind of sidelined him, and it was like 6 or 8 weeks or something like that. However long it is when people have an appendectomy, I don't know off the top of my head. But it kind of like, it throws off your whole year when you start the year injured. And we could say the same thing about Darren Yappi a couple years ago when he had a shoulder injury, and Ted Pietro started with a shoulder injury a couple years ago as well. Like, you're not getting the fitness that you need when you start on the bench. You're not impressing the coaches. And how much of like your season starts in preseason, where you are making your best case in the 6-8 weeks of preseason, where it's that first impression is the only impression. And once you're outside the squad, it's so hard to get back in the squad. I think that's what kind of has happened to Connor Ronan in the last couple of years. So I'm excited to see him with a full preseason, full chance to be fit, because he can do it all. He can defend. He's great with the ball at his feet. He's a great outlet. The one thing we got robbed of a few years ago was we never got enough of Connor Ronan and Jack Price on the field at the same time. A couple of ex-Wolves guys who were very similar types of center mids. We never got to really see them both on the field at the same time. But Ronan is that similar kind of player, where passing the ball, like unlocking the ball going forward, is one of his best strengths. But he can also defend. He can also play the sixth position. Like, he's very versatile. So I might bump him up. It'll be interesting to see. I think he's going to be one of those guys, if he's not starting, he's first or second off the bench.
Knocking on the door for sure. That's interesting. If you look at that group, what is like the strength of that group? Is it like possession ability? Is it passing? Is it defensive solidity? Like, of that Hamzat, Frederick, Atencio, Ronan kind of quartet.
If Hamzat can come in and acclimate to MLS and what makes MLS unique compared to other leagues, if he can come in and acclimate to that, I think he becomes kind of the focal point of the midfield right behind Paxton. And if he can do that, it unlocks everything else. Like, if you have a guy that you can trust behind Paxton, like a Diego Chara type, imagine if you could just drop Diego Chara into every starting 11. Like, that changes.
Who wouldn't take that?
Right. That changes the full identity and everything of your squad. And you're hoping that Hamza, he doesn't have to be Diego Chara. He doesn't have to be Darlington Nagbe. But if he can be in that similar mold where he's defensively, he's very good, and with the ball at his feet, he's good at finding the next pass and doesn't turn the ball over, changes things.
We should talk the offense, starting with Paxton Aronson. I think a guy that also in Sharpie on the field.
Yeah.
How do you get the best out of him this season?
You know, I think that's the question Wells and the staff are asking themselves, or have been asking themselves since they all got the job. And last year, Paxton didn't show up in the box score as much as you might think, or as much as, say, like a Georgi Mihailovic did before he was moved to Toronto, where he then continued to show up in the stat sheet. But it's where you could see Paxton without the ball that you knew, okay, he gets it. He knows how to play soccer. He had this move in Kansas City. He ends up splitting two defenders without the ball, where he just reacted a split second before everyone else, and he ran forward a split second before everyone else, and he ends up one-on-one against the goalkeeper, and I think it was Pulskamp, and the ball's just like a half step behind him, so he can't get the shot off. But it was those things, doesn't show up in the box score. The type of thing that's like, okay, he gets it. And I think that's where your Ronan, your Hamzat, Frederick, Josh, like those guys need to be able to get the ball to Paxton reliably and in stride. That's the term I'm looking for, in stride. And then you hope that Sealy and KDP are able to play off of him. And then you get the ball to Navajo and Yapi, and you're creating confusion for defenders. Like, that's ultimately how you score goals in this league, is you get defenders to turn and face their own goal and run towards their own goal. And that's when chaos breaks out, right? That's when defenders lose their guys, or that's when somebody just sneaks in on the backside of the goal, whatever it is. But it's Paxton making the runs without the ball, which is great because that's what he said, like, that's what I'm best at. That's what I'm going to bring to this team. It's not necessarily going to be like, I'm the 10 distributing, like a Georgi Mihailovic type. I'm the best guy without the ball. Get it to me, and then I'll get it to Hoffa, or I'll get it to Dante, or I'll get it to Ted, whatever that looks like. But it's him without the ball that I think is going to end up being maybe the most influential thing on what the 2026 Rapids look like at the end of the day. Is Paxton able to get open, and are guys able to find Paxton when he doesn't have the ball?
Now we have projected Ted Pietro out on the left side, Dante Sealy. I think we could marker him in on the right. At the striker, Javier Navajo, we know what he brings. Darren Yappy. Like me seeing this formation, I'm like, how can we get Yappy on the field more? Like, can you see him pushing out left, maybe playing some minutes out on left wing? Because I know he does have that in his repertoire.
You know, in Minnesota last year, which ended up being a win, one of the 3 road wins was at Minnesota, which, like, one of the strangest results of the season. But it's because we basically played Minnesota the way they were playing everyone else, and they couldn't handle it. And then I think they came back here and beat us at home, or picked up a late goal for a draw or something like that. But Yappy ends up with a brace by playing on the wing, because there's so much raw talent. There's so much. This guy is obviously a top level striker forward in this league. How do we get him on the field? And you manufacture it by putting him on the wings. Not his preferred position, but you get that brace in Minnesota. That was kind of when he really hit his stride last season. Was like almost like a confidence boost to him, almost like a reassurance of like, oh yeah, I can do this. I can score against these guys. And they weren't just like little tap in goals either. They were like quality strikes. One of them was from the top of the box to the opposite corner, like a real professional top level goal. So the question of, yeah, how do you get him on the field? Do you have to manufacture it by putting him on the wings? If that's what it takes, because the talent is undeniable. The work ethic is undeniable. And after somebody scores 8 goals without being the focal point number one choice for the striker position, you got to find a way to get him on the field.
It's going to be a fascinating storyline to kind of watch and see how this like offensive unit unfolds. I mean, just looking at some other ones throughout the year. Let's take, players in the depth chart that like right now we're not projecting the starters. Who outside of that, first 11, 12 or whatever has the best chance at winning a starting job?
I know I just talked about Ronan quite a bit, and I mentioned
That's
Keegan.
why I said 11, 12 because
Yeah.
yeah.
It might also be Murph. It might be Yappy. Like kind of the outside pick is Wayne Frederick. He's a guy who last year at Portland, or maybe it was 2 years ago, he ended up subbing on and got a red card within like 9 minutes of subbing on, and it was just like a very dismal performance, a very not good like showing. And you kind of look around and you're like, man, like that. Also, the red card was like a very bad one. Like it was a very obvious red. He was late on a challenge. You could see he reacted late, and it's like, man, is the game too fast for him? Like, is he going to be able to catch up to it? And then everything since that has been lights out. Like he grew through that adversity. He got better from that experience. And he's a guy that, like we talked about earlier, you're betting on your youth developing. You're betting on your young guys continuing to get better and better. And he's dealt with some injuries as well that have sidelined him. If he's fully healthy, that's a guy that is going to steal minutes from people, whether it's Hamza, whether it's Ronan, whether it's Atencio, doesn't matter. The only guys whose names are absolutely bolted on to the 11 is Zach, Paxton, and Hoffa. Everybody else is up for grabs. You could say Dante's like in Sharpie right now, but if he doesn't produce, like that's a guy who would be benched for someone else. It's just Zach, Paxton, and Hoffa. So the opportunity will be there for a guy like Frederick, and the potential when he's playing well, you see it. You see why people are so high on him as a midfielder. Like he's got the athleticism, he's got the brain. It's just the game slowing down for him.
Mm-hmm.
It's just catching up to the speed of MLS. Which, if you're betting on your guys developing, that's a prime candidate right there.
Sometimes I think for young players, they have to like just come out, make a mistake, and just be like, all right, it's all uphill from here.
Yep. Yeah. And you got to have, not to steal anything from Ted Lasso, but goldfish memory, right? Like it's like, all right, that's behind me. Well, let's get on the plane. Let's go home. I'll sit out the next game because I got a dumb red and I'm going to get better. And you have to have that mentality. Everybody in pro sports has to have that mentality, but especially the young guys.
I think you'll drive yourself crazy if you don't to some extent. What are some realistic expectations for Colorado in 2026?
I mean, we say this every year, right? Like but let me talk about 2015 Leicester City. I'm not going to say the Rapids are going to win the Premier League, but that's a mythical like tier of history, right? Because they were plus 5,000 or plus 50,000 in Vegas to win it, and they win it. But every year we talk about some team at the end of the year. Who's this year's Vancouver Whitecaps? Who's this year's St. Louis City back when they exploded onto the scene? Or from last year even, who's this year's Minnesota United? Who's this year's San Diego? Like there's always a team that comes out unexpected because the league is so built on parity that defies their expectations. Realistic expectations are let's make the playoffs. Let's build. But you're dreaming big. Why can't this team be like Vancouver last year? Why can't this team be like Minnesota? If you're not an Inter Miami or if you're not an LAFC where you are just, dripping talent out of your ear holes, you got to find other ways to win games and manufacture points. And pretty much every coach in this league is a smart soccer coach. Like they know what they're talking about. They know how to coach the game. there's always one, because of the parity, that figures it out and does better than you expect. Why not the Rapids?
I like the optimism.
You got to have it, man. You got to have the optimism. You got to believe, because there's always somebody resetting that benchmark, right? There's always nobody predicted Vancouver was going to finish second in the West. You show me a receipt from someone saying they were picking the Whitecaps this time last year, I'll give them $20.
Yeah, it wasn't me personally. I have always liked the Whitecaps in a way. I thought their approach was clever. They had really, really good role players. Um, Looking at this Colorado team, I agree with you that there's a realistic thing, like fan base, realism, group, like they should be like, yeah, playoffs. We should be in the playoffs. You have a DP like Paxton Aronson, and you have a striker like Hoffman Navajo. Yeah, you should be figuring that out. It's not like you have glaring holes somewhere on the field. I can see this team maybe needing some time to figure out chemistry and stuff like that. So
No,
yeah,
that's fair, especially with the new
maybe supporter shield is out.
Maybe we'll let Messi go back for supporters shield again. But you're right. Like, maybe there is an adjustment period, because when people come to MLS, and I don't know how much you guys have followed, like some of those. I think the Athletic puts it out every year, like some anonymous like player survey, or the MLSPA puts it out.
Sure.
And like the thing that gets talked about all the time is the travel and the weather, and that's something that, if you're not familiar with it, it's a culture shock. And I guarantee you, people are going to be talking to every new coach and every new player, and they have this conversation and they explain it to them, but you don't know it until you're in it. You don't know what it's like to fly to Seattle to LA 2 nights in a row and then fly back home in the middle of the night, and you just put however many hundreds or thousands of miles underneath you, and it adds up, especially when you go from playing in Houston in August to playing in, uh, let's say, Colorado in October. Like, those are different climates. And there was one a couple years ago. We played in Orlando in April. The week before, it snowed, and then in Orlando it was thunderstorms. Like, no other league has that.
Mhm.
No other league has that, and so
Absolutely.
that's always an adjustment period. But you still get 34 games. You still get plenty of opportunities to rack up enough points to make the playoffs, to push for top four, get some home field advantage, make a run.
Let's talk about some storylines to follow throughout the season. I'm going to assume most people watching this video are not Colorado Rapid fans. So when we catch you guys on a Sunday or a matinee, what should we be looking for? What are some guiding stories throughout the season?
It's a perfect question, because the first game of the year is Sunday at Seattle. It's the 22nd. Um, it's going to be, what are the tactics? What is the strategy? What is the identity of the team? Something that the club has put out on social media. Like, there's a really good, digital team that has captured a lot of content down in preseason. And one of the things that Matt Wells said recently was, we're going to be pressing monsters. That has been a formula for success in this league. If you look at Philadelphia, um, if you look at St. Louis, which both of those, a couple of Carnell teams, if you look at Red Bulls in their heyday, like, pressing can work in this league. But then the other interesting thing that Wells said was, we want to own the ball. That has not been the way MLS has been trending in the last couple of years. It's been a
Yeah.
lot of counterattacking. It's been a lot of, we're going to use our pace and our athleticism. You can have the ball for as long as you want. We're going to take it and score in 15 seconds, and then you can have the ball again. That counterattacking has only become more and more popular. The kind of possession-based soccer is not as in vogue as maybe it was a few years ago. So it'll be interesting to see, like, is that the identity? Like, do you want to own the ball? Like, San Diego, I think, was one of the teams making the playoffs who had possession rate over 50%. Like, it's the game is changing, but if you can evolve with it and point out the inconsistencies of the way that other people play and take advantage of it, that's how you can make a living.
we don't know too much about the tactics of this team and the styles and stuff like that. So I won't put you on this too hard. But is there anything in particular that you think this team might match up well or poorly against?
I think given the locker room, given the guys, there's always going to be work ethic. I think that's one of the things you can consistently point to. Like at no point in the season last year did anybody give up on Chris Armas. You talk about culture, you talk about locker room, you talk about culture guys that you want in your locker room. A total locker room full of the anti-diva. So I think hard work is going to be one of those things that they're always going to have in their back pocket that helps you get points. It doesn't always show up in the box score where it's like, oh, we scored this goal because we just outworked the opponent. But you know it when you see it with your eyes. You know it when you see it in the stands. So that's going to be one of the big things. But also, like, is it going to be pressing? Is it going to be possession? Like, is it going to be a 30 pass buildup that leads to a goal? You know, kind of the old Sporting Kansas City from a few years ago, like 2018, 2019, when they were doing that. It's a great question. It's a great question. I think they'll be able to outwork anybody, but we'll find out in Seattle. I feel terrible saying that. I feel like I'm not giving you guys any content
That's
here.
fine.
But it's
I'll take a speculation. I think with the offensive talent and the individual talent that is in that group, I think that when Colorado is able to isolate defenders and force them into uncomfortable positions, that is when their offensive players are really going to shine. Right, when Paxton Aronson is ghosting into defenses as like a late runner that's not picked up by the midfield, when Rafa Navarro is isolated 1v1 versus a center back, which is where the center back doesn't want to be. He wants the help, right? When he's facing Rafa all by himself, that's going to be where Navarro looks good, or when he's playing in between the center backs. When Sealy and Kuda Pietro are kind of ghosting into half spaces around the fullbacks or just in front of them, and picking up the ball in those half spaces that is forcing the defense into tough positions. They are the types of players that strike me as being able to create and manufacture opportunities. That is the thing that I see when teams cannot deal with that movement.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
I'll touch on that too. I'm going to turn this episode into an article. It's going to have the episode and everything embedded into it. But kind of what I wrote in my own notes was like teams that underestimate the Colorado Rapids, teams that don't meet them with the energy and focus that maybe they deserve. And then my go-to for every team is just teams that play out the back. Like if you're going to get pressed and turned over in the back with Paxton Aronson and Rafa Navarro there, that is like I could see the ball leaving Paxton's foot and finding Navarro. Like that's not a situation you want to be in when you could pull like the defenders out of their shape. So I feel like we've answered this about 10 different times, but I'm going to ask you one more time for the official question. Which player improves the most in 2026?
Man, I could almost say off of his 2025, given the motivation that he's going to have, you could say Zach Steffen.
That's maybe you read my mind. Yep.
Ooh, that's not where I was going. I like it.
He started so strong, got hurt in national team camp, and never was quite the same. He actually, I think he might have even gotten hurt before that at San Diego. Timelines are getting confused now, but he had an oblique or a rib injury, and I think he picked it up at San Diego, and it was a midweek match, so it was like terrible timing. But he kind of got hurt in spring after having a really strong first 5, 6, 7 games. And I don't think Pochettino's necessarily picked his goalkeeper yet. I think everything that if I'm in the discussion to be the goalkeeper for the U.S. men's national team for a World Cup on American soil, I am going to give it my absolute all until Pochettino calls himself and says, yeah, you're not the guy. And Zach hasn't gotten that call. So I would expect a very motivated, a healthy Zach Steffen, and like we talked about earlier, like a little bit of a different defensive strategy that's not going to put him out on an island to defend guys one-on-one. I think that's a guy who progresses back to his old form, maybe some MLS goalkeeper of the year level of quality.
That's super compelling. I agree. I don't think the U.S. men's national team goalkeeper position is nailed down by any means.
And
so
most likely it will be a player from Major League Soccer. Very good chance.
Somebody's going to have an outrageous spring up until the end of May break. Somebody is going to claw their way onto that roster and into the starting 11 that we're not expecting. And Zach Steffen is talented enough for it to be him.
He's definitely been there too, which helps his cause. We got to ask the opposite question, right? A player who regresses. That doesn't necessarily mean, look, I'm conscious that you have an official position. It doesn't mean bad, like they're not going to be terrible, but just players maybe coming down to earth. Maybe the new system doesn't favor them as much as the old system. Anything like that is all fair game.
I don't think it'll necessarily be a coming down to earth, but I think it could be Navajo, not because he gets worse, but because Darren Yappy gets better.
Valid. Navajo had a great season, and if Yappy's taking minutes,
if Yappy comes in and becomes that valid rotational piece where you don't lose anything or you lose very little by swapping them out, that's a guy who then eats into your minutes, eats into your stats, and on paper it looks like, oh, Navajo took a step back, but it's actually because Yappy continued to take such a step forward, which feels like the theme for this team in 2026 is who's going to be the guy who continues to improve? Who's going to be the guy who gets back to the form that they used to have? Because there's so much youth. There's so many young guys. And you have a coach who is kind of that player development guru. And it's kind of been like the mold for the organization, like going all the way to the top of KSE. Like when the LA Rams hired Sean McVay, that's like, we're betting on this younger guy who's unproven, who other people around the league are going, you're crazy. He's got no head coaching experience. What are you doing? That same formula is here with Wells, where it's a guy who maybe has been overlooked for this opportunity in the past, a little bit younger, ready to take it on. Could be.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time here to be here with us. Connor Cape, voice of the Colorado Rapids. Anything else we haven't touched on? Any final thoughts about the 2026 Major League Soccer season?
Man, can't wait. Can't wait to see what the break does. I feel like teams are going to approach this season differently than other seasons just because you get a break in between. Like, you don't necessarily have to worry about the travel or the weather quite as much because you get 2 months off to rest and recuperate. Like, obviously your superstars, like Leo Messi's not going to get 2 months off, but that's Inter Miami's problem. 29 other teams are not going to have that Messi problem with him going all out in the World Cup. It's going to be interesting to see, I think, how teams approach the first phase of the league because of that break that's coming.
Absolutely. And we'll be here to talk about it on the Designated Pundits. Thank you guys so much for spending your evening with us. Make sure you subscribe, find us on all your social media, and join us in the next team. I think we have 12 teams left before we cover all 30 in Major League Soccer. Connor, thank you so much. Scott, have a great night, and everyone have a good weekend.